Welcome back to Live at Urban Wild. We seem to be having technical difficulties today, which is not unusual, but today is January 1st, 2023. Yes, it is. So Happy New Year to everybody. Soon we're going to discuss what does that mean. Shavua Tov, good week. Gut Woch. Have a good week, everybody. Here's little Dingo, our new mascot. Here, of course, is this one. This is Mike. We renamed Mike recently. And all of our friends, they're back in the park, including ones we haven't seen in a while. Sorry, that's Mike. I made a mistake. This is Fuzzy, who we have to rename today. Hey, Fuzzy, you don't come to me for attention anymore. Anyway, we're going to discuss. You stop complaining. You like attention. Stop complaining. That's Wuzzy. We're going to discuss a lot of things today, including what's the significance of today. How did it start? We're going to discuss a lot of different things. And it's so beautiful to see all the cats back here, helping me tell my story, helping me get out of my comfort zone, and finding new comfort zones, because that's what it's all about. Here's our little mascot, Dingo, short for Dingola. There's probably only one person in the world who knows what that means. And this is out to him. It's out to everyone. What a beautiful little kitty. Probably scares the heck out of everyone who sees him the first time with his missing eye. I wanted to call him Popeye, but fewer people would get what that means to me than those who know what Dingola is, and that's only one person. Let's go figure out that one. Sorry, little guy, I didn't mean to kick you. Anyhow, here are the cats. And why is all this significant, and why is this such a beautiful day? How about we start talking about what the significance of today is? Today is January 1st, 2023, which means different things to different people, and considering the fact there's been 100 million people, more or less, they figure, in this world as we consider us to be, there's going to be at least 100 million different views of what January 1st means to them, because, of course, to some people it means absolutely nothing. To other people it means everything. And there's everything in between, which affects the rest of the world. So what is today? Well, today is the 8th day after December 25th. So far, what I'm saying is non-controversial. Everyone agrees that today is the 8th day after January 25th, and even people who celebrate Christmas not on December 25th, and even people who don't celebrate Christmas at all, there's no dispute that January 1st is the 8th day after December 25th. Now, why is that significant? Well, because the 8th day signifies a lot of different things. It signifies hope. I'll explain why in a minute. I've explained why many times, but I'll get back to it in a minute. I'm saying this because even according to traditions, for example, Ukrainian Orthodox or Greek Orthodox, where they calculate and celebrate Christmas different and New Year's on a slightly different calendar than the rest of the world, including the rest of the Orthodox or the rest of the Catholic or the rest of the Christian world, it's still 8 days apart. New Year's and Christmas. Sorry for the sniffling. So the question is why, and what does that signify? Now, no matter what I say, there's going to be other opinions, so I'm not trying to say anything as fact. I'm not trying to say anything as it's this way and not the other way. It's an opinion, it's a view, and it's what I learned and what I heard, so I'm willing to share it. What I haven't done yet is put out the water. I today decided to share the feast first because I wanted this to be a Thanksgiving feast. I'll get back to what I mean by that soon. I also wanted to give out a shout out to the Canadian cat food company, because somehow here we are in Israel getting Canadian cat food because it's the best / the cheapest for what we can offer our constituents. So somehow we get cat food from Canada. So shout out back to Canada. Anyhow, I do want to distribute the water, but in the meantime, if this is what they prefer, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to try to explain what's the significance of the 8th day. And again, when I say things, I'm trying to talk to the people that I think might get, directly or indirectly, these messages. And I say that because there's a first line of people that would hear it because they're one way or another connected or signed up. There's a second line of people that are not signed up or don't know me or aren't connected to me or this in any way, but they can see it because they're connected. In other words, they're online. they're otherwise connected enough to somebody who is connected, they might see it. Then there's everyone else. Now, unless you understand what I mean, it's really hard to explain, but I know I have very, very few followers relatively, and I make absolutely no efforts to increase my following. I rarely ever invite, I rarely ever send out, I rarely ever ask people to join. I do sometimes, and usually it's because they've already connected one way or another to something else that I'm sharing. But I rarely ever solicit. I don't know if I ever do, but I rarely ever solicit. So I know for a fact that I'm not getting to the widest possible audiences. So why do I do what I do? Because part of what makes the World Wide Web and social networking and this whole concept so effective is learning how to influence. Meaning, finding the key people that can affect the key people that will get the message out properly. And I'd like to believe that's one of my specialties. I'd like to believe it's something that I've proven myself to in the past. And one can say this is either the proof or the test all at once together here. And I'll try to elaborate on everything I'm saying, given the chance. It's Ellie, Terry, Ellie, aka Terry, aka Yosef, aka a lot of different things. I've been renaming this cat just because he keeps reminding me of so many different images, but whatever the case may be, he likes and needs and wants my attention. This poor guy. Call him Limpy because he has a chronic problem with one paw and he's always limping. He also has this very regal pose all the time. And I feel sorry for him because I'm sure to him, to her, I don't even know his gender, her gender, and in this park it's hard to tell, and that's not even important. We're not gender biased here. Especially since with all the interventions one must make between spaying and neutering, gender is not the issue. Roles aren't even the issue, although that would be the next issue. But of course, when you're in a group, when you're in a community, the whole point is to share responsibilities, to have redundancy, to not put everything on one person for any particular responsibility, to have backups, to share. Like this little guy here. He's such a mix of so many different things. You can just tell by his color. His color is so precious. And if you see his little face with one eye, poor guy. So what is the 8th day? According to tradition, what does that mean? Well, to the religions, to the faiths, to the systems that believe in 7 days of a week, to the traditions that are based on the 7 days of creation, the 7 days of the week. Not all of them follow that. Not everybody counts 7-day weeks. We have to factor that in. We have to realize that. I know it's hard to imagine, because anyone listening to this, probably one way or another, if not has a default 7-day week, knows that for most of the industrialized world that runs on a unified system, it's a 7-day week. So first of all, we have to understand that all of these things are man-made contraptions. All these things are man-made systems that we teach other people, starting with ourselves and then our children and the people who want to follow us, to participate in this. We have to teach systems in order to share. So everything we have is made up. I don't mean made up that it's fake, but made up meaning that it was designed in order to help people, including the Torah. I don't mean made up by man, I just mean it was designed in order to help people as a guidebook, which is exactly what the Torah is. And I use that because for me and for the people that I represent, it is the absolute, but I also believe it's the absolute for everybody, which is why I'm bold enough to introduce the subject into this realm, because applied properly, and of course everything I'm saying is my opinion, but applied properly, it is for everyone. I say that because in the Torah, it says that Moses, a leader that very few people in the world deny to be an example of a leader. By the way, he was not a Jew, quote unquote, by modern definition, meaning he was from the tribe of Levi. He was a Levi, he was a Levi. That is significant because it's really deep into the politics that I talk. The politics about the fact that the problem in the world today, we're still trying to define people by who's a Jew and who's not a Jew. Not who is a member of the covenant who is following the rules, because the rules applied so complex and so detailed, but not because they're complex and detailed, it's just because it covers every situation. And we know how to apply the exact rules for everyone in their situation. It's much simpler. The problem is, in the confusion, we try to apply all the rules to all people at the same time, which means none of them apply to anybody. Think about that for a minute. It's basically the problem of modern democracy. The problem of modern democracy is you can get people together on major issues, but then when it comes to what's considered minor issues, or issues that actually deal with each individual's needs, there's never enough votes to get recognition. So people are always deprived of their basic needs, their individual needs, as opposed to their communal needs. So we're allowed to survive on a certain level as long as it fits within the norm of others. So I'm trying to explain is that there has to be allowed into any proper system a certain amount of individualism, of anarchy, but not in the sense of destruction, but of self-rule in government. Because if you won't let a person do it for themselves, if you won't do it for them, then basically you're enslaving them. Basically you're teaching people to be depressed and be sad and be tortured, be imprisoned in their own lives, in their own bodies, and never to complain, because that means that you don't want the benefits of what society is giving you. This is what I mean when I keep repeating all the time that we're suffering in this generation of a combination between Stockholm Syndrome and survivor's guilt, which doesn't allow us to actually do what it takes to help ourselves. When we finally fight that, which is basically the American dream, which is, I don't care what other people think. I'm going to benefit myself. I'm going to take care of my own life. I'm going to be free. It's at such a rebellious stage. It's so much more about what I don't want than what I do want, that people think that freedom is, how much right do I have to destroy myself, to hurt myself, and even the people around me, because that's my right. That's just stupid, I'm sorry to say. Now, where does freedom go from smart to stupid? Well, or necessary to dangerous? That's life. In life, we learn that. So back to the original politics of what I was discussing. The Torah. The Torah is a guidebook for everybody in the world, given to Moses, who was a Levi, but he was also a king, which is a contradiction in a certain way, meaning a kingdom was allocated to Judah. Kingship. The monarchy was in the house of Judah, one brother. Levi was another brother. And of course, Joseph was another brother. So what do you do when you have a king, when you have a father, Jacob, who became Israel, and he has 12 kids that are equally powerful, equally important, equally significant, but all in their own way. Not just significant, they are all necessary. They're all necessary as components in a society. For the house of Israel, for the house to have a straight line to God, because that's what Yisrael stands for. Yashar El, straight to God. So if you want a path straight to God, if you want Him to listen, if you want the universe to respond to you, you have to be in concert with the universe. Why do we use the word concert? Because concert is where everything, every piece, every musician, every tool, every instrument is different. On their own, completely different results. Some pleasant, some horrible. But when they're done together with the right leader, with the right maestro, when they're guided and conducted and managed properly, not controlled, but managed and guided for each one to be creative in their own way, then it becomes a symphony. Most beautiful magical experience, most beautiful artistic experience. And that's what the goal of mankind is. The goal of mankind, from what the Torah says. And there's very few faith systems, there's very few systems of philosophy that are not fatalist, that say the same thing, which is why I believe it's true, because it's a universal truth. And if it's a universal truth, it's something that we don't have to argue about, which is why very few people talk about it. But then the problem is it becomes forgotten. We know it so deeply, but we forget about it. It's so obvious, the things that I'm saying, that we forget about it. So one master that I've been spending most of my adult life studying and trying to understand and teaching and discussing with other people, Rav Nachman of Breslov, who's an extremely central figure, not just in my life and in many people's lives, but at the moment for the whole world, because there's a war going on in the Ukraine that nobody seems to know or care about, that for some reason have been central to my life, at least since Glasnost and even before. So getting into that politics we can talk about later, but the point is that Rav Nachman said, I'm going to teach you a system that's very new but actually very old. And that's the key. The most important things in life we already know. Now, what is he trying to tell us? Every parent tries to teach their children what it is to survive based on what they learned. It's really hard to get the right message to your children when they're young, when they're innocent, when they don't know anything. Kind of like Adam being created with all the gifts in the world, spoiled brat, put into this world to take care of the garden in paradise, and he made a mistake, whatever that means. Now, I don't even want to talk about that, because we're not talking about a person. This isn't about guilt and blame. This is very simply about the fact that what did God expect? Regardless of how old Adam was with his physical body of light, no matter how much wisdom he had no life experience. No life experience, because life didn't exist. How could he have any experience? How could he know that what if, that's the biggest two-letter word. By Rudyard Kipling, that poem, If. Basically that if, that what if. It's been the last 5,783 years according to some counts. It's been all the different numbers if you count them by the Gregorian calendar. As is BC and BCE and AD and all the other things and CE. And I know what that means, but I'm saying however you want to count it, it's the same amount of time. Whether you count it in billions of years, trillions of years, lifetimes, eons, cycles, doesn't really make a difference. Now we're getting back to the 7th and 8th day and what's the significance of New Year's. So 7 days is what this world explains. It's an interesting prime number. 7 days is what most traditionalists explain to be the days of creation. Of course, it doesn't mean anything if you don't understand. It also doesn't mean anything if you look at science, and it also doesn't mean anything if you can't relate to what such an oversimplistic term means to teach us. But there was a stage, there were phases, and there was phases where the world was created, and there were phases where life was created, and there were phases where we turned into humans, or created as humans, or whatever you want to call. And the formation of the natural world, the formation of what we know in this world, that is the analogy of 7 days of creation. So everything goes in a 7-day cycle, and yes, there's 30-day cycles more or less as far as the moon. And there's 365 and a quarter day cycles as far as the cycle of the sun. But the cycle of life, in other words, we can give it our all for 6 days and we need a day of rest. We can prepare things, we can have a day where we can enjoy it, then all of this life is meaningless. So 7 days of creation represent what it takes in this world to do things, to get things, to make things. Some things take longer, some things take less, some things take as long as 6 days, and some things even take longer. But the point is that there's a cycle, there's a concept in this world, or if you do something, you put in enough effort, just like the 6 days of creation, eventually you'll get to your Sabbath, get to your 7th day, be able to enjoy it. That's good enough when you're trying to teach things to kids, to teenagers, to beginners, to people who don't have time to think out of that, to menial workers, to people who need to have fulfillment in what we call this world. But this world, this material world, isn't enough. There can't be some kind of hope of freedom, which is what the American dream was, which is what Gan Eden or paradise, or just retirement, or all those concepts of, well, there's beyond just the 7 days. That's not enough, especially as our lives get longer and longer. People's life expectancies were 30 or 40 years not that long ago. And you figure that most of society until even today fought wars. Many people never saw past 20. If you So now the biggest and the brightest and the best and the strongest and the most potentially capable, risking their lives for most major progress, for most major gains, and a lot of people dying. It was a very different contemplation. You didn't have to think about this 8th day or the 9th day. You're happy to get through the 7 days. But then life expectancy started expanding, started extending. We started living longer for all sorts of different reasons. Keep in mind, according to the Bible, there were times people lived hundreds of years, and then all of a sudden it stopped. Pretty much around the time of King David. There were idealistic states in the past where resemble more to where we're going. There was a period in between of harshness. There was a period in between where we really struggled, where all those empires that seemed to thrive and grow in their own got to the point of overlapping, very similar to the story of Abraham and Lot. They had to decide how to divide the world. And of course, Lot went to the direction of Sodom, to Sodom, which wasn't yet then what it is now. But it represented immorality. And interesting enough, in the Gemara and the Talmud, and the Babylonian Talmud, and I emphasize Babylonian because it has different lessons than the Jerusalem Talmud. In the Babylonian Talmud, it talks about the fact that if a person has an opportunity to help somebody else but doesn't, even when it doesn't cost them, and especially when it doesn't cost them anything, if you can benefit somebody else when it doesn't hurt you, and you don't, that's considered as immoral as Sodom. It's considered sodomite. You don't have to rape somebody, you don't have to torture somebody, you don't have to do horribly disgusting things, whatever they are, because everyone will define horribly disgusting as whatever is horribly disgusting to them. But the Gemara, the Talmud, which is the expansion of, the explanation by the sages, by the wise men before things got as horrible as they did, the wise men explained, what does it mean in those days? In the proper days, in the days when people actually had consciousness, it meant allow someone else to benefit when it doesn't hurt you. Those are some of the principles I've been trying to apply every day of my life ever since I learned that. And I learned that in depth around when I was 15, 15. So it's a part of the explanation of what drives me the way it does in the last 39 to 40 years, because yes, that's how old I am. Not 39 to 40, 39, 40 plus the 14, 15 that I said before. So if there's an opportunity to help other people and you don't, that's as immoral as Sodom. That is very, very different than what we teach people in capitalistic North America. Now I'm saying all this because during the time that I've been talking in this Happy New Year moment, and I still haven't explained the connection between the two, there was a feeding frenzy. There were a lot of cats. They were starving. They came out here with a vengeance. They didn't give me a chance to put out the water that I usually do. But look, lots of leftovers, lots of untouched food, lots of spots where it's just too much. So before I get criticized and saying, well, why am I wasting? I clean all this up, I consolidate it all, I leave certain piles with the leftovers in place where I know the cats will benefit later because they come all throughout the day. Knowing that this is here, and this feeling of abundance, the abundance mentality as opposed to the scarcity mentality, is it changes everything. That is the difference between Zen and Evazala Chaser and helping people. That is the difference between what makes a person considered following the Torah or not. I don't want to discuss who's a Jew. The person who follows the Torah or not. The person who follows the Torah understands that helping other people is not to their detriment, no matter what. Even when it costs you. But if it doesn't cost you anything and you don't belong in this space. That was the line that Abraham drew for his nephew. If you don't understand that concept, don't stay here, which is why Ezra the Sofer, Ezra the scribe, was also a Kohen, a high priest. And that's significant because he was also a leader, also in the role of king, but he was from the tribe of Levi, because the priests, the Kohanim, are a subgroup. Subgroup makes it sound lower, not a subgroup, meaning they are a lineage within the tribe of Levi that have very, 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 very specific rules and permissions and obligations. And if anyone in the world is allowed to or prescribed to eat meat and not be vegan, quote unquote, if from the sense of what they eat, the dietary element of being vegan. I say that because vegan means different things to different people, which is very important. I say that because the Pope finally wrote a letter, and a movie came out about it, explaining the 5 voices of the world. And that to me represents the 5 elements, the 5 letters of being a vegan, which is why we have a group in Facebook called The Vegan, which is an acronym, which stands for the voice, which is the V, of Earth, which is E, Guardians, which is G, Algonquin, which is A, N, which is network. The realization of the Pope's letter and the documentary movie, or whatever you want to call it, that came out after that, to me is a proof that people are listening, and that when I do the things I do without following, targeted the way I do on purpose, it has the most effective outreach. And this is something I learned from my father. One of the many things, one of the infinite things I learned from my father. But if you want to get things done, don't take credit. Let other people take credit. It's the most guaranteed way to get things done, is let other people take credit. How do you use that to your advantage, and how do you not become what we call in Israel a friar? And I don't mean a friar as far as using oil, because that's unhealthy. That's not whole food, plant-based. I don't mean a friar as far as a strange haircut and working under certain, working with Robin Hood, because that's, of course, doesn't apply either. I'm talking about the Hebrew slang, the Israeli slang, which means a sucker. So what does the 8th day mean? The 8th day is hope. The 8th day is the day beyond the 7. That's retirement. That's paradise. That is circumcision, which I say because it's an extremely controversial topic. But it's what New Year's Day represents. New Year's Day is the 8th day from the day that whoever celebrates Christmas counts to be the 8th day. That is the day that the baby that was born on Christmas would have had his circumcision. He would have become a member of society. And of course, this is long before he was crucified. This is long before many other things happened. But the point is, to start off the story, you have to have a backstory. If it wouldn't be for all of the interesting evolutionary growth of pop culture, with rewriting stories by filling in the backstory, that's what this generation is all about. This generation is all about taking all the stories of the past and continuing them. In other words, yes, tragedies are tragedies when they're tragedies, but when they end in victory, it's not a tragedy. Just watching this kitten, watching that beetle, and then seeing me. It's an interesting urban wild moment here. This cat is distracted by me because I'm the bigger threat, and it's following that beetle. Now it's flicking the beetle. It's attracting other cats' attentions. I'll get back to my lecture on time in just a moment. I'm just curious what's going to happen with this beetle. Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. I'm not sure what this cat's intentions are with this particular beetle. It's just an interesting Nat Geo moment here. It's amazing how at the same time the cat has to pay attention to me because I'm theoretically a threat, and other people, although I'm not a threat. It's looking at its prey or its kill or its toy, and all going on at the same time. And we'll come back to this hunt after. Getting back to the 8th day. So you see, the 7 days are this world. It's what you teach kids in order to believe in a system. If you work hard enough, you'll have a day to relax. And all this is true, by the way. I'm not saying that there isn't something spiritual and deep and holy. That is all true, because there's something spiritual, deep and holy about being able to work for your needs, accomplish something, and have something. There's no greater success or blessing in this world than that. So teaching that is the truest of true. That you work, yes, there's a certain amount of time you work, but never work more than you need to, because sometimes things might take more than a week. And it's not a failure. You're allowed to stop. You have to stop and recover. You have to stop and rest. You have to stop and regenerate. Now there's another standoff between these two kittens. That's the same kitten that was looking at the beetle before. Urban Wild. These are kittens playing, learning what it is to be in this world. This is exactly the fulfillment of what I'm describing in my story. So you see, 7 days when you tell these kittens to follow certain rules that if you don't, you won't survive. There's also the negative side. 7 days when you teach these kittens, you teach your babies, don't leave your mother. Don't go away from home. Don't cross the street. Don't touch this. Don't do that. All the don'ts. Then eventually, after 7 days, they say, yeah, but there's beyond that. I've seen this. I've seen people go and come back. I've seen cats climb that. I've seen all these different things. That's when you have to teach them, yeah, well, there's cycles, there's months, and there's years. There's also the 8th day. If you put all these 7-day weeks together, eventually you'll have an 8th day. Eventually you'll have a retirement. Eventually you'll have the American dream. Eventually you'll have some kind of paradise that doesn't exist within just the 7 days. If you live long enough, and that hope kind of goes away. So that 8 days is represented in, like I said, circumcision, in Chanukah, which is all about Chanukah and the 8 days and the miracles and the light and the oil. It's represented in the 8th day of Shmini Atzeret, which is the 8th day after the Feast of Tabernacles, which is the harvest festival. The 8th day is also, okay, you've done this, so you've lived the whole year and you had the season and you harvested and you reaped. Besides the spiritual work in the temple, which is done by the priests, by the Kohanim, where they did the sacrifices. Yes, I know what a horrible word to say for a vegan, but we'll get into that. Look at those tiny little eyes peering over the wall. So after doing all the sacrifice for all the other nations in the temple, when there was a temple, when the priests had to sacrifice their lives, they were the human sacrifices for people. That's where human sacrifice comes from. The self-sacrifice. Yes, they were commanded by God to eat meat and to allow others to eat meat, which was a punishment. It wasn't a benefit. People thought it was because of the pleasure trap and the ego trap. You convince people something long enough and they'll believe it. It has never been good for people. It has never been healthy for people. It's never been easy for people. It's never been cheap for people, which is why it was considered the diet of the rich, and then it led to the diseases of affluence, which were the destruction caused by people doing things that weren't meant to be for them, placing needs with wants. And it's not a question of complaining. I'm just explaining that the root of all this was somebody had to bear the brunt of the sins of the nation, and those were the priests. When they did the sacrifice, these were atonements. Everything they went through to prepare the animals, to slaughter the animals, and all the rituals they did were to tell people this is what's supposed to be you, for your actions of destruction, for your actions of harm. You were supposed to get this done to you and that done to you, but we will save you. We'll give you another chance. See this, eat this, taste what it is, death. Taste what death is, taste what destruction is, taste what pain and harm is. The problem is people did it so often, people were so imperfect, which is what humanity is, that they had to get used to it. They had to actually almost celebrate it, because after a certain amount of times you make enough mistakes and either the meat's going to kill you, the embarrassment's going to kill you, or your lifestyle is going to kill you, meaning what led you up to that is going to kill you, because of course these were all atonement offerings for sins. So yes, the priests are the only ones who should and could, but only when they go through what they do. I happen to know somebody who lives in upstate New York, and he works with and lives with animals, and he argues with me that vegans are crazy. Now, he's not wrong, but it's why he thinks they're crazy, which is what I would take issue with. Because you see, calling them crazy because of what they do is one thing. Calling them crazy because they're a minority, well, that's basically what represents following the Torah. Doing what's right, even when you're the only person out there. So the fact that they're a minority was the wrong argument, especially since vegans aren't a minority. Most people in the world are vegans. The question is, how do you count the world? What do you consider to be the world, and how do you count people? Which is the origin of all questions, origin of all problems, which is the origin of everything. Which is why part of this, besides we call it Urban Wild, it's also All Lives Matter, because unless you start with that, which is also a premise of the Torah, that all lives matter, to the point where we're allowed to do anything to save a life, except for very few things. which represents saving more lives. So the idea that vegan is crazy, I don't have a problem with. The idea that vegan are minorities and that's why they're crazy, I take issue with that, because first of all, they're not a minority, and being a minority does not make a person crazy. Taking that further, there's only one way that even vegans agree that it's okay to eat meat. So the animals exist. The problem is that it's not healthy for most people. For most people, most animals aren't healthy. Because of that, there's another issue. And the issue is, again, when you're trying to teach rules to the public and make general statements and individual things. Because any person who asks any real expert an individual question, they will get a different answer than if this question is meant for the masses. Because the masses can't comply necessarily to what one person can comply to. And not only that, it's not meant for the masses. And not only that, but it might not be right for the masses, which is, I know I'm redundant, but I haven't prepared anything I'm saying. I'm speaking as I'm thinking and as the thoughts are evolving. So the 8th day is that hope, but that also runs out, as I was saying, as lives are extended, as that benefit that you get on the 8th day is already not much more exciting than what you had on the 7th day, and all it gets boring. So it has to be promises. Promises of more, promises of more, promises of more, but all those promises, if they're empty and if they're unfulfilled, then it leads to disappointment, which is suffering, which is sadness, which even when it didn't exist. Unfulfilled false expectations are the biggest source of pain in this world, if not the only source of pain, because it can never be fixed. I would even postulate that these are the causes of chronic pain, the unfulfilled, impossible expectations that most people have. That's cancer. So back to the 8th day. The 8th day isn't enough, so we need the 9th day. And I joked about this on the day after Hanukkah, which this year happened to be December 27th, because we happened to be invited to an extremely important history-making event, which was on that day, which is how it came together, the 9th day. What does the 9th day represent? I believe we're in the 9th day now. Now, of course, we're always going to be in the 9th day if you count back 9 days. But meaning the day beyond being satisfied with the 7 days, day beyond hoping for the 8th day, we're in the 9th day where we can actually have everything we want. Where everything we could possibly want and everything we need already exists. The problem is too much choice. That confusion is the only problem left. How do you enjoy something you don't know what you want next? Well, that's where we're at now, is making order with the overabundance. That's what PCRM, People's Committee for Responsible Management, stands for. That's what every group, every element that we have, that we do, that we represent, stands for, which is bringing people together for that. Helping everyone understand the lowest common denominator. We are not telling people that it's not okay to eat meat. What? What did he just say? I never told anybody not to eat meat. When I started becoming a vegetarian, I know that's not a vegan, when I started becoming a vegetarian the first time at age 8, it was under very, very, very different circumstances. The world then, 46 years ago, was very different. We didn't have the industrial meat complex. Many things weren't as devolved and as advanced as they are today, to the point of destruction, but they were getting there. I was already a victim of a lot of the things that people are complaining about today. I was already a victim of a lot of the things that affected me personally. And I navigated my way through it with the help of those who helped me, and contrary to those who didn't help me, which means they also helped me. And I recognize that. So infinite love and gratitude to all those people that I thought were my enemies. Infinite love and gratitude to all those people that I argued with. And I realized that thanks to you, I found there's different ways of coming to the same conclusion. And that's life experience. So I have total absolute gratitude to everyone, even people I didn't then, thanks to my evolved realization, including a son-in-law of mine who, yes, I have several sons-in-law. Son-in-laws, sons-in-law, I'm not sure what the plural is. I'm a grandfather, thankfully. I'm a father. I have many relationships, thank goodness, with many people, but I have a son-in-law who has a lot against me, and he's not wrong. But he'd have less against me if he understood what he was talking about, and if he understood things he doesn't understand. And that is the fact that if you don't ask questions, you're never going to know. And in my context, what I'm talking about is the fact that things aren't always the way they seem. And even if they were at the time, they often evolve and change. So when I say that it's not wrong for some people to eat meat, and that I never said no one should eat meat, there are exceptions. When you're talking to the public, you have to talk in general terms. Dr. David Katz, if I'm not mistaken, it was him, and I hope I'm quoting him correctly, one of my most recent great heroes and influencers that I follow. He was talking at a convention, or at whatever you want to call one of these round table things, about the diet wars. That you have all these people arguing, and he was mentioning the fact, there are people in the world who have tremendous protein deficiencies in some countries. For example, in Africa, there are people starving. I know this for a fact because another person very close to, who I'm proud to call a son, has been to places in Africa. He's been to 116 countries and counting. And he's seen people who cannot drink, who cannot eat, who cannot swallow. So when you talk about everyone, when you talk about people, know who you're talking about and have some respect for the fact that there are other people out there that are way worse off than you are, and that if you're going to include them in your discussion, at least be fair. This poor cat, called him Stumpy for a while. I forgot already what we renamed him. Maybe I'll be renaming him for a while. He's back, and I'm happy to hear that. All the cats here have different hours. We didn't own them. They're not our cats. They're part of our community, and they help us learn things. And as you see, cats have been coming and going, doing their business, calling their friends. I have no idea. I can only assume. But some of them are back. And here's this big fluffy one. And this one, who we call Mike. I call him Mike now. He reminds me of Mike Bossio, only for the good. He's coming here, hanging out. He's like everyone's uncle. Everyone's favorite uncle. That's him. Of course, only for the good, only for the credit. I mean, no negative. There's no slurs here. There's just a nickname. He teaches all the kittens. I'm not sure what he's doing there. Obviously, he smells the food. That's a relatively fresh food bag, and there's probably remnants in there, but he's really cozy in that bag. It's like a kitty sleeping bag. Anybody looking for a way to provide your cat's shelter, take empty 18-kilo bags of cat food, put them in a safe place, and you have a cat sleeping bag. Am I really, do I mean this seriously? Well, use it at your own risk, try it at your own risk, but here it happens to be really cute. These cats really seem to like it. I'm wondering if this can be a trend. We do have a bunch of bags, and we'll see. This is very funny. So I'm going to keep my camera on this for a while, since I have nothing more interesting to look at while I keep rambling on and talking. So Dr. David Katz, in explaining the concept of the diet wars, he said, yes, there are places, for example, in Africa, where there is such a deficiency of protein, and the people are so malnourished there, that yes, they would actually benefit from eating certain kinds of animal protein just to give them a chance, but of course, only for the intervention. There are other people who live indigenous lives, who live in areas where the way they eat animals, and I'm going to have to move around a bit because the city cleaners are here and I have to make sure I don't leave any junk out. So there are, of course, indigenous populations that live properly with their animals, and yes, there's a certain amount of culling of the herd, but this after they treat them properly, raise them properly, took care of them their whole lives, fed them, and then to put them out of their mercy after they live a certain amount of life. And of course, the weakest ones, which anyways wouldn't have survived in the wild, killing them, eating them, and then of course there's entire population of people who eat animals that have passed, which is a whole other thing. Of course, not a Jewish thing, because we're not allowed to, not a Torah thing, and I'll clarify soon the difference between Jewish and Torah when I get there. What I'm trying to explain is that there's a place for a lot of things. It's a very different thing if you raise an entire herd of cattle, and as they get to a certain age, and after they've fed their young, and after they've done all the things they need to, and they've led their life, and especially if maybe they're getting sick or getting old or not enjoying their life as much, that you can euthanize them maybe euthanasia came to being just so we can understand that such thing as a merciful killing, merciful death. There is such a thing. So there is room for that with animals too. I have seen many animals that, thanks to veterinary help and thanks to human intervention, that animals live long past what they might have otherwise. And is that a blessing or a curse? Well, that's a really good question, and I'm not one to decide because it's extremely relative, and that's a discussion that will fluctuate every moment of every second of the discussion depending on what's going on. So just getting back to the fact that there are circumstances that change every question, but on a whole, we do not need meat to survive. That's a fact. Scientific fact. Are there exceptions? Yes, there are exceptions, but on a whole, if you talk about 8 billion people, 99.999% of the population, I can say that with surety, given the right circumstances, if they have the rest of what they need, and of course safety and water and the things you need to be alive, then most people do not need, and I say most meaning 99.999% of the people in the world do not need animal protein, do not need animal products. Does it mean they can't survive with? No, many people can. Most of the world's population can survive with animal products. Is that a contradiction? No. Needing and wanting is not the same thing. Needing and be able to tolerate is not the same thing. And then there's a question of how much. And there's a question of from where. And all those different things play into all the questions of what is a vegan. So the voice of Earth Guardians Algonquin Network stood for the voice, meaning we want people to hear what other people won't say. Earth means there's an element here where this is nature. It's not just an element of ethics, it's an element of nature, that we will not survive on this planet if the planet doesn't survive. And if we're killing the planet and its ecosystem and its biodiversity, we will not survive. G is guardians, meaning there are people who are willing to do something about it. Whether it means physically being on site, meaning they're willing to be earth guardians as far as stewards of the land, or they're willing to build things permaculture style or otherwise, being on the frontier and going off grid. There are different elements of being guardians. There's also people who spend money or other assets they have to protect nature. So there's different ways of being a guardian, and there's no absolute. But the point is, some people want to talk, activists, and they can't necessarily do. Other people want to do, but they can't necessarily enforce. Other people want to enforce, but they can't do the other things. So that's guardians. Algonquin A, well, it was very serendipitous that we happen to have been, we happen to have lived, we happen to have met with, we happen to have been blessed by and done ceremony with and worked with the Algonquin First Nations in Northern Ontario and Quebec. And the details of that, feel free to look or to follow or to ask with our friends that have passed. Stephen Hunter, of blessed memory, we remember him, and of course Ibadallah Chaim Tovim, to distinguish him in good life. Chuck Commanda, I hope he's well and alive and okay. And the other people that I would like to mention, but I don't know who wants to be mentioned or not, so I don't want to put anybody in danger, because today mentioning people in the wrong context can endanger them, unfortunately, but hopefully I haven't done anything wrong. And of course, if you look at any of my feeds, if you know how to look back far enough, you'll find all these connections. Nothing is hidden. We actually had a peace treaty that we had the merit of brokering and presenting to the Governor General. This was in anticipation of Canada's 150th birthday in 2016. Of a treaty of stewardship, very similar to what's going on now, only 7 years later. So we know that what we tried to do wasn't for naught, and that's actually where Mike Bossio, the one who he nicknamed that orange cat in the distance thereafter, he was very involved, and I told people, I don't expect things to change now, but you need witnesses. I need witnesses to the things that we've been doing. So yes, I went to town hall meetings in Bancroft. We moved to Bancroft. We were in the sunny desert up near the Dead Sea. Then we were in a permaculture farm in the middle of this country, in the middle of Judea. Went from the Judean desert to the most beautiful Judean forests, and had the most beautiful permaculture farm until just after the Paris Climate Change Summit. We were told it by our granddaughter, guess what? What are you doing for our future? It's nice that you're retired and you can take it easy, but you haven't left us a future. So we got off of our arses, we got off of our behinds, and we went back to Canada, invited by the government to Which government? Well, there was the federal government, the new Trudeau government, and there was some provinces that wanted help to plan for the future. We didn't realize all they wanted to do was talk. Without going into too many details, that's where the A from Algonquin comes into this. And Algonquin, interesting enough, means our family, we are one. It's an inclusionary term, and I don't want to misquote it, so please. I only mean this with infinite love and gratitude. I'm sorry I'm getting choked up here. I'm a little emotional because I'm going way beyond the time I wanted to. I know that more and more people are following this from a distance, and I know that the effects of what to happen are happening. So A was Algonquin, basically meaning we all represent each other. I had the crazy idea to beg that person I call my son to come all the way out into the middle of nowhere and to take me to a meeting that was going to be for Anonymous. Who and what is Anonymous? Anonymous for the animals, Anonymous for this, Anonymous for that. Well, my history with Anonymous is the ultimate soul. It goes back to 1995. Hey Anshi, I was talking to you and about you, only in the best of ways, and where you fit into this, you'll have to go back and listen to this. I was talking about the fact that, yes, believe it or not, even vegans, depending on which ones, believe that some people are supposed to eat meat. And is anyone represented by the Torah? I said it are the ones that we call the priests, the Kohanim. But they were the kapara, they were the atonement for the people. They were forced to eat meat, whether they wanted to or not, which is why they had a very low life expectancy, and they had to change shifts of who was allowed to, who was supposed to actually do the sacrifices and eat the meat. But they were the human sacrifices for the nation. They were the human sacrifices for the people. That they would perform the sacrifices, do all the dirty work. And yes, they had to eat meat. So we never said, vegans never said, and I never said that nobody in the world should eat meat. But the ones who do and should have to do it properly. And based on what I heard, that there's people in upstate New York who actually hunt, according to the Torah, wild game to control the population and slaughter and eat it in the most merciful possible. That's the only way the Torah permits it, but the Torah permits eating meat. It doesn't recommend eating meat. There's a big difference. It doesn't recommend eating meat because meat isn't healthy for us, definitely not on a long-term basis. So I agree with anyone who thinks that anyone who says that no one in the world should eat meat, we'd have a big problem, especially since the world economy is based on finding alternatives right now, which is why everyone can and should eat meat if it's done right. That is meat if you can eat it the way the Kohanim were supposed to, the high priests or the priests were supposed to, then everyone should eat that way, but very few can handle that. So I'm going to do a very, very, very liberal vegan thing here and say that power to all those who eat meat sustainably, because without them doing it properly, weiß mir wie in die Torah is die Torah sagt man make nicht essen Fleisch. Simple. Bereshis. Look in Bereshis, look in the Maisa Bereshis. Adam Rishon was only supposed to eat in what was available, the things in the garden, 5 categories, which was fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. But then they sinned, and everything changed. So, it went all the way down to Egypt and slavery, which is the chapters in the Bible now, and of course they weren't eating meat then, not according to the Torah. They were slaves, they were pagans, they were serving idols and doing all the bad stuff. They kept 3 things that were considered according to the Torah: their names, their dress, and their language. And then they were taken out miraculously by their leader Moses. Moshe was a Levi, not a Kohen. Not a Kohen, and also not a Judean, not a king. Took them out, and then they were not allowed to eat meat. But then they complained. So God gave them the meat in the desert so that all of them would die eating meat, to learn that it's a mistake. Anyhow, it was permitted only under certain circumstances. And if you listen to the whole entire lecture, I explained that meat was permitted, never recommended, permitted as an atonement. And those who ate the meat and prepared the meat were the Kohanim, were the priests, and they were allowed to eat meat. Yes, but the same Mechaber, the same writer of the Shulchan Aruch, when he was wiser in his age, later on in his years, he said that doesn't apply. Later, the same Mechaber of the Shulchan Aruch wrote that's only in certain circumstances, not lechatchila. But if you want to have this discussion, I'm inviting you. I'd love to have this discussion with you anytime. We can have it live now if you really want to. But I think we can have it better if you ever want to have a machlekes l'shem shemaim, have a real discussion. You can see. Or I can send you a link and you can watch a class. But anyhow, back to what I was saying. Oh, there's a beautiful dog up there on the stairs. I haven't noticed this until now. This dog often comes to the park. And now I see him on his balcony up there. I will be happy to show you that later. I'm so happy you asked. I look forward to having that discussion with you. Have a gewaldige gitvach, have a gewaldige everything. Love you very much. Infinite love and gratitude. And we'll talk. If you want to see it, not from me, I'll send you a link, Bli Neder, but you have to make the effort to watch the lesson, which is in English. It's obviously all Torah, and watch it at your discretion. But anyhow, I'll send that to you, Bli Neder, after I'm finished talking. So moving right along. It's a question of understanding and dialogue. There's a place for everyone in this world, and I believe that's what the Torah is. Yes, including the Shulchan Aruch, but the Shulchan Aruch was written for the diaspora Jew. We're trying to get out of the diaspora. We're trying to get out of the... Okay, can we have this discussion after? We're trying to get out of the diaspora. There's a Galus Torah, which is the Bavli, which is the Babylonian Talmud. And there's a Torah for the Geula, there's a Torah for the redemption, and that's after. And then there's a period of time where we're trying to do that correction. I believe we're past that, but there's some people who want to stay in that. If you want to have this discussion right here, right now, we can. But I'd rather have it where I can give you the details. But if people don't mind me putting this on hold for a minute, I'm just going to film the cats and send a link. Okay, I didn't realize I've been talking for an hour. I am sharing a link. This link that I shared is a lecture translated into English by a rabbi, a teacher, a scholar named Asa Kesar. I respect him very much. I follow a lot of what he teaches, but I'm not saying he's the absolute word about anything. What I am saying is this particular lecture, he debunks many of the myths that people have about what the Torah says about eating meat. He debunks many of the myths by putting things into context. I recommend and suggest anybody who wants to have a discussion with me about the Torah perspective about eating meat to first watch this, because I have much more to say than what he says in this thing, because many people will argue, and I also have things that I contend with, because it's a question of context. I recommend highly anybody who wants to truly have a Torah discussion with me for the sake of a positive outcome, not for the sake of arguing for the sake of bad blood, because you will never get me to get angry. And you'll never get me to argue, and if I am wrong, I will be the first person to admit it, and that's the reason why I've been able to, as difficult as it has been, but I've been able to in my life make so many drastic changes, including becoming a vegetarian and a vegan, and including stopping when I stopped, and including becoming whatever I become every time I become that, and taking it to the end. So I will always admit to the truth if you can prove it to me. I hope that you will be respectful and do the same. If that's the case, I highly recommend watching that video, studying it. When you're done, you have questions, contact me, and then we'll talk. In the meantime, I've been talking today in this video for more than an hour. If anybody wants to talk to me about this video, I also recommend please listen to it from the beginning. I'm going to post it and share it. In the meantime, I have to collect my things, because it's not that I don't mind continuing, but I'm late for something else I need to do, because I do have other responsibilities. This isn't usually supposed to take up my whole morning. And I also see there's a cat coming that I like to just get on the video. This is one of our Siamese friends, and what do I mean by that? Well, I'll elaborate some other time. I'm just happy to see it coming from the other side. Came all the way here, which shows that our community has expanded. So infinite love and gratitude. Shavua Tov, Gitvach. Have a great week. Happy New Year. As it's happening, as it comes to you. And it doesn't have to mean anything except for the fact that it's a new start. Everyone believes that new starts are important. And that's what this is, no matter how you count it. And it's meant to be the start beyond the 7 days, the start beyond the 8 days. I call it the 9th day. Happy 9th day. Infinite love and gratitude as well that you have come. Take it easy.